Good afternoon, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This is Rich again, back for your second video blog of the day for Saturday, April 25th, 2015, around 3:29 in the afternoon, Billerica, Massachusetts. Still some sun and clouds today, but temperatures in the mid-50s, and it feels more like mid-March, and with a breeze, it feels even more colder. When is spring gonna get here and stuff like that? Not too much news to report, so on to my next subject. My next subject is about the former tabloid newspaper, the Weekly World News. The Weekly World News was in publication from 1979 through 2007, but it popped back up as an insert in another tabloid magazine called The Sun, and that was in there until the Sun ended publication in 2012. The Weekly World News was infamous for saying some most outrageous news stories, none of them which were true and stuff, but it was real funny. The Weekly World News was printed in black and white completely when it got published in 1979 through 2007. Even though, like all the other tabloid magazines, eventually printed in color, the Weekly World News continued to be published in black and white. Its publisher was Gino Rose Page Jr., and its slogan, "Nothing but the truth, Weekly World News." All the stories in the Weekly World News were fictitious, and it was weirdness and was more humorous. Usually the stories had to do with aliens coming down from other planets and invading Earth and stuff like that. Like some politicians adopted aliens, or aliens taking over the United States or another country in the world and stuff like that. Other times there were stories about, terrorism and stuff like that, and ways to fight it in a humorous way. And they used to have the world's fattest stuff, like the world's fattest cat, the world's fattest rabbit, the world's fattest dog, the world's fattest bird, the world's fattest monkey, etc., etc., etc. And they also, the Weekly World News had a lot of parodies of Elvis Presley being alive. This was an ongoing thing for many, many years. Elvis Presley alive and well, or Elvis Presley breaks a leg, or Elvis Presley paralyzed and stuff like that. A couple of times they had stories about Elvis Presley dying again, and Elvis Presley dead second time and stuff. Plus they also had other dead people they reported alive, like John F. Kennedy, or Martin Luther King, or Marilyn Monroe. Some of it was funny. And they also had some other things, like upcoming economic disasters. Like several times they reported a second Great Depression weeks away and stuff like that. Some of it was very humorous and stuff like that. And other times they had, like in 2004, the 2004 presidential elections are going to be canceled because of voting machines in Florida not be able to work, and they would have to cancel the elections and stuff like that. Plus they had some stories about taxes on anything, like tax on tap dancing, or tax the fad, or tax on loose change and stuff, or tax on exotic dancing. They had some columns in the Weekly World News, including Ed Anger, who had his opinions and stuff. Hi Dolly, which had to do with like advice and stuff. Horse Sense had to do with medical advice. Monkey Business was one had to do financial stuff. Page 5 Honey was a very beautiful girl on posing for pictures. They were clean, of course. And also Bat Boy. And the Weekly World News was selling a lot of newspapers back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. It got to be real popular in 1996. The Weekly World News had a television show on the USA Network which lasted about a year. The first host was longtime newsman Ed Newman, and he hosted it for a few months. Then actor Ed Begley Jr. took it over and hosted it for the remainder of its run, which was, they didn't get the ratings, but it was a funny show and stuff like that. And I always would get the Weekly World News because it was so funny and stuff, and all the stuff was, parodies of stuff, but I didn't mind. I needed a good laugh or two and stuff like that. I used to work with some people, and I would tell them about the Weekly World News, and they would call it the Weekly Idiotic News. Here's everything. They just thought it was idiotic and stuff. But when the internet came and you could read stuff online, the Weekly World News started to lose readers. In 2006, only about 85,000 people purchased the Weekly World News on a weekly basis. It ceased publication in 2007 as a standalone newspaper, but the Weekly World News popped back up a few months later in another tabloid newspaper, The Sun, which at first was kind of similar to Weekly World News with outrageous stories, but like in the 2000s it was turning into more of like medical and health and financial stuff, and they put like maybe a 6 to 12 page insert of Weekly World News. Usually the stories were reruns of previous stories in the Weekly World News, but they had some new ones here and there and stuff. When the Sun ceased production as a newspaper in 2012, the Weekly World News stopped with it, and the Weekly World News is now an online site, but you have to pay for it to get some outrageous news stories and stuff like that. I loved reading the Weekly World News. It was something to for my entertainment and laughing at it. It wasn't idiotic. It was so funny and stuff like that. And that's about it on the Weekly World News. I'll be back with the third and final video blog of the night, which will be about WWE Hall of Famer Mr. Fuji, legendary tag team champion, and a legendary manager. He led Yokozuna to the WWE title. And don't forget, in a few more days, my memories of the Boys and Girls Club of Somerville. I was a member of the Boys and Girls Club of Somerville for a few years before moving to Billerica, then becoming a member of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Billerica, and that's coming stories in 10 more days. Go find something to do, plus stories about the the memories of the Boys Club, the stories about the Torch Club, Melissa Hurley, Betsy Quidor, Janelle Moscone, Tracy Tunstall, Mike Goodwin, and so many others, and legs and eggs. Have a good day, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and as the words of the famous Sean Lucha, get out!